So recently Vox, that's the American media organization that promises to explain the news to you, they call it explanatory journalism, sent this young lad, Johnny Harris, to Haiti to find out why Haitians are so poor whilst their neighbours, the Dominicans, are relatively well off. This is all part of Vox's big budget series, Borders, a show that's already enjoyed its second season. Now, if you don't know, these two nations, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, share the same resource-rich island of Hispaniola. So why the disparity in wealth? This is what Vox journalist Johnny Harris seeks to find out.
I came here to find out how the two countries that share this one island can be so different. With a politically volatile and impoverished Haiti on one side, and the stable and relatively rich Dominican Republic on the other. How did this line produce two totally different worlds?
This entire premise, the assumptions made in his opening questions, speak to the false narrative he's about to weave. To assess and compare the wealth of two nations, you should be considering things like the relative economic liberty of citizens, the relative skill set of the labor force, the technology available to entrepreneurs, comparative political stability in each country, local business ethics and practices, crime, infrastructure, culture, and so on. But Johnny really doesn't investigate any of these things and instead immediately suggests it's the division between these people that causes the wealth gap. It must be the border. The show is called Borders, so maybe he has to go for that angle, but still, whilst trade and borders are not irrelevant in a wealth calculation, Johnny is omitting a hell of a lot of important factors, and he's deliberately limiting the scope of this investigation.
My journey starts here at this beach village in southern Haiti, where Haitian merchants, most of them women, are preparing for a nighttime boat ride. The women boarding this boat have one goal: to make it to the border where they will be let into a Dominican market to buy and sell goods before returning to their villages.
Why don't they just open a market in Haiti? We will never get an answer to this question in this fantastic piece of journalism.
It's international trade at its most informal. We're taking these boats because the next door mountain range makes the land journey almost impossible.
Why don't they just build a road?
These worn-out wooden boats have been making this exact journey twice per week for decades, and yet the process remains chaotic and unorganized, as if it's happening for the first time.
Why is this process still chaotic?
All of this energy, time, and effort, all to transport a handful of goods that in most countries would be shipped in bulk inside one of these. We make this 7-hour journey to the border town, arriving around 4 a.m. The sun rises and we walk to the border market. This market was established right on the border as a partnership between the two nations to give vendors from both sides a place to buy and sell on equal footing. As we approach the border, I quickly realize that's not what's happening here.
So I'm looking across the border right now into the market, and you can see that Dominicans are already setting up. This is one of the big complaints of the Haitians. They're stuck on this side, waiting to cross the border, and the border guards are just delaying it. And meanwhile, the Dominicans are able to set up and get the best spots. These Haitians come from miles away on this grueling boat journey that I know now firsthand is very grueling, and they get to the border and the guards stop them for no reason. It's supposed to open it up for everyone at the same time.
The guards keep the Haitian women from crossing, not letting anyone know how long it will be. The tension grows, and then, finally, hours after the Dominicans were allowed to enter, the guards open up the bridge. They buy and sell for the day before returning to the boats to make the journey home. The grueling boat journey, the senseless discrimination, it embodies the asymmetry that exists on this island. Watching it happen, it's impossible not to ask how it got like this.
So we can see that there's this attempt to portray Haitians as innocent victims of Dominican intolerance. There's no attempt to find out why the Dominicans treat them like this. Why the animosity for Haitians from Dominicans? Where does it come from? Doesn't it take two to tango? Shall we get the Dominican perspective on this? No, because Vox is spinning a narrative, so these questions are never asked, which of course encourages the viewer to likewise not ask these questions. Instead, you're just supposed to believe that the Dominicans are behaving out of prejudice, senseless discrimination, as Johnny Harris puts it. This is actually completely untrue, and the Dominicans have good reasons for their behavior, but we'll come back to this later.
There are a few key things that explain how this island produced two very different countries, but if you want to get at the very root of it, you have to go back to when this island was owned by two European powers, France and Spain. This island is actually the first place that Christopher Columbus set up a colony in the New World on his first voyage back in the 1490s. France wanted a piece of this island because it was rich in resources like sugar and coffee. So they fought a war with the Spanish, and they ended up splitting the island in two. One side would be the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo, and the other side would be the French colony with the same name, Saint-Domingue, just in French. And that is the most important part of understanding this whole thing, is how these imperial powers treated their colonial possessions. The French exploited the land. They brought in tons of slaves, and they were interested in making Saint-Domingue solely an economic producer.
They destroyed the soil from aggressively harvesting the same crop year after year, and they created a group of very resentful, overworked, and abused slaves that eventually rebelled. The Spanish had a different approach. After establishing domination on this island by massacring the indigenous population, they didn't exploit it like the French did. Instead, they went to places like Mexico and Peru to look for gold. So they didn't bring nearly as many slaves onto this island, and as a result they weren't nearly as profitable a colony. Instead, the Spanish integrated with the remaining indigenous population by recognizing the native leaders' authority and intermarrying with the locals. The result was a smaller and more racially mixed population, with a sustainable economy and a political system, something totally absent from France's colony.
This becomes really important in the early 1800s when independence comes around. Haiti declares independence, fights off the French, and basically declares itself the first black former slave republic in the world. They do so with very little framework for a society and for a government. And they also do so with land that has been exploited year after year with the same crop, which basically destroys the fertility of the land. And to add to all of that, because they were this first black republic, the world essentially isolated them. The United States didn't want to recognize the independence of a black nation. They thought it might become a slave empire and seek revenge.
Suffocating embargoes and the independence debt, as well as the lack of any tradition or investment in governmental institutions, guaranteed Haiti's failure from the moment it was born. And a racist world made sure of it.
Alright, let's correct some errors and dig into some of this tripe. First, the idea that Haiti was left without a legal or political system, that's just not true. You're correct, Johnny, that the slaves revolted and became the government, but in becoming independent, they kept French laws. Haiti inherited the 5 classic Napoleonic codes, among them the Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code. Following independence, Haiti did not opt for the creation of new laws, but retained French law, and French as the official language used in legislation and the administration of justice. So compared to other civilizations that had to develop their own legal and political systems from scratch, the Haitians inherited some of the best in the world, an opportunity they've squandered by routinely allowing incompetent, corrupt, self-serving demagogues and dictators to take power, and by demonstrating complete legislative and administrative incompetence.
Primitive rhythms and the ancient cult of voodoo are the heartbeat and lifeblood of the people who live in one of the world's most miserable countries. This is Haiti, a land of idol worship and of Papa Doc Duvalier. Together they ruined this once lovely, once prosperous country which sits on one end of the island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean. Nature endowed this place with fertility and natural beauty. It was left to the greed and ignorance of men to ruin it. Haiti's downward progress from flourishing French colony to become the world's poorest state reached its lowest point under the 14-year dictatorship of François Duvalier, which ended with his death in April. Duvalier's legacy to Haiti is poverty, ignorance, disease, and misery.
Haiti used to have a functional, state-of-the-art, world-renowned legal system, but today, well, here are 4 quick points for you. Haiti's criminal laws have been supplemented over the last 150 years by a series of laws and decrees that are unknown to many of the legal community, and not all legal actors have copies of the laws. So cops, lawyers, even judges, they don't know what the laws are, and there's no way to look them up. Uncertainty abounds because the penal and procedural codes have significant gaps and internal inconsistencies. These gaps, particularly in areas like arrest and detention, grant broad discretion to the police and other justice actors, which leads to abuse and enables rampant corruption. Human rights don't really apply in Haiti because their criminal laws predate the development of international human rights instruments.